what I plan to do now is to move on to question 2, which is the summary question. Now, I know that you are bored with reading the instructions, but please always read the instructions. There they are. And you should be familiar with this because it's been the same for a number of years. The 7 points, right? Check the number of words, just in case this time it has changed. Check that you are still writing a fluent paragraph. Check that you don't need a title, and check that you know that you've got to indicate the word count at the end of your summary. So you count the number of words and you put it in square brackets. I like it on the right-hand side at the end of the summary. Now, can I say, please don't lie? You forget that markers have a very good eye for the size of your handwriting and the number of words that you've written. And they'll take one look at it and think, this is not right. And anyway, they are required to check. So please don't write 90 words when it's 123. All that will happen is the marker will check, do a double line, and cross it all out and say too many words. Do not use contractions like don't and wouldn't, because that is 2 words and generally isn't the right style. Home language is required to write a fluent paragraph, but remember they could change it at any time. So read the instructions. So 7 points, fluent paragraph, and then what you have to be very careful about is check what is the question for this summary. So usually the way the examiners set it out is it tells you what text C is about, and then it tells you what exactly you are looking for. So here in the November paper of 2023, it's how silence helps one to cope with everyday life, and they usually put it in bold so that you can't miss it. So you're looking at how silence helps people cope with everyday life. That's all you are looking for in the passage. So if we were to start out, we would look at the passage. So what are we looking for? How silence helps us to cope. So the world around us, often difficult, doesn't help. Many of us tend to lose focus, find nothing there. With all the discretion of everyday, it's easy to recognize when we need less noise. Not there. Little less noise is good for our well-being. So far, nothing there has told us how silence helps us to cope. So you're looking only for that, and you would go through the passage looking for that. Now, I recommend that my students take a highlighter or a pen or a pencil and they number the points as they go. So if we look at paragraph 2, one of the major reasons why silence has become an important part of everyday life is that it provides one with the ability to focus. There it is. How does silence help you to cope? And I like underlining, but if you want to highlight, highlight. So my recommendation for how you do this is you number the points in the passage. The only difficulty is making sure that you aren't numbering 1 point as 2 points. So if there's repetition or if it's the development of a point, just make sure that you see, okay, that's 1 point. This is the repetition of that point. I can either put this in or that, but I mustn't put in both. So I would recommend that you do the last 5 years' summaries. So there is a summary in every November paper, and if there was a June paper, because there wasn't during COVID, there would be a second summary in that June paper. And if you go back even further, there was a February-March paper. So I would suggest that you do at least 10 summaries. Mark the points for yourself, go to the marking guidelines and check, okay, have I got the points? Because if you look at how the marking guidelines are set up, and please do not set this up the way the marking guidelines are set up. You've got to write a fluent paragraph. They will give the quotes on one side. And sometimes there are more than 7. So however many quotes they've got in this particular exam. Then the examiners suggest how the candidate might express it in their own words. What I want you to do is you've got your passage, you've underlined, you've numbered, whatever. Check that you've got the same quotes. Now, it doesn't matter if you called it number 2 and the examiners called it number 3, as long as you've got those quotes. So check, can I find the quotes that they're looking for? What was I asked to do? How silence helps us to cope, or how to look after my tackies, or what to do to reduce stress, or whatever it is. Check that you've got the same quotes. Then see that you can put it in your own words. Now, what does this mean? So it's really important now to go to the marking guidelines. You need to look at how this thing is marked. So they want 7 points. And you get a mark for each point. So as the marker is marking, the marker will tick. The marker will look at this and will say, okay, that's point number 4. And the marker ticks and puts a point. Then I find point number 1, then I find point number 6, then I find point number 7. The marker ticks and puts the number according to the number of the quotes in the marking guidelines. Now, this is for the moderator. So the moderator comes along and says, do I agree that that was point 4? Do I agree that that was point 1? Do I agree that that was point 6? What if you repeat a point? Then they go 7R. So you don't get a tick. Then they add it up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, you've got 4 points. Now, what if you quoted? So if we go back to this, what you wrote in your summary was what they've got here as these quotes. Then as the marker is marking, the marker goes 4 wasn't a quote, 1 was a quote, 6 was a quote, 7 was a quote. So this is how it's marked. The tick is recognizing the point. The number is the point in the marking guideline. And the Q tells me it's lifted. It's lifted out of the passage. So I got 4 points. So how do I mark this? Let's say that you quoted entirely. Every single one was quote. You lifted entirely. Then if you have 6 to 7 points, they don't give you any marks for the language. If you have 4 to 5 quotes, they give you 1 mark for the language. And if you have 2 to 3 quotes, they give you 2 marks for the language. So this person had 3 quotes. 2 to 3 quotes is going to, it's only got 4 points, but it's only got 2 to 3 quotes. It's going to give you the marks, the 4 plus the 2. So this person's going to end up with 4 and 2. But what if, let's get rid of the Q's. So let me just rub out the Q's. What if you got 4 points and there were no quotes? Okay, so what's the rule if you haven't quoted? And I'll come to what not quoting is in a moment. If you have 1 to 3 points, they're going to give you 1 mark. If you've got 4 to 5 points, they're going to give you 2 marks. And if you've got 6 to 7 points, they're going to give you 3 marks. So this person would get 4 plus 2. Okay, so they're going to get that. So that's something's wrong there. Hang on a second. What have I done with the quotations? Apparently that's right. Don't ask me. That's the marking guidelines. Now, what is using your own words? Be very, very careful. If you use your own words so that it's completely different, it's completely new, then sometimes the marker doesn't recognize the points. That's problem one. The second problem is if it's completely new, you often change the main idea. So in fact, it's not accurate. It's now inaccurate. It's not actually what was in the passage. It's not exactly what the passage said. Remember, this question is designed to give you marks. There are some candidates who really, really struggle with English home language. And they know that this might be the place where they get like almost all their marks on the paper. So if you find it very, very difficult, then just lift, quote it. Make sure that you're still in the 90 words. Make sure you've got 7 separate points so you're not quoting the same point twice. And just quote it. What will you get? 7 plus 0. That's fine. You'll get 70% for this question. But what can you do to get the language marks without falling into the trap of changing it so much that the marker's going, I don't even know if this is a summary, or by changing it so that it isn't what the original passage said? You make little changes. Just tiny changes. Change a singular to a plural. Change the word order around. Make tiny changes, which is why I advise people to underline. Because if you've underlined, let's have a look at our passage. What did we underline? Silence provides one with the ability to focus. So you can say, silence gives people the ability to focus. Silence means that people are able to focus. There you are. Do you see what I've done? I've made the tiniest change. But if that's point number one, the marker can recognize it. So silence allows people to be able to focus. 8 words. So you count the number of words when you've put it in your own words. Make sure you're in the 90. Cut out words if you aren't in the 90. Don't make it so short. A number of students think, oh, if I do it in 40 words, I'm wonderful. Not necessarily. What I find then is that the point can be quite long. So if we just go on here, it provides one with the ability to focus because the modern world and its various noises enter one's brain all at once. So maybe the examiner wanted that second part. So it allows people to be able to focus and ignore all the noises of the modern world. Maybe that whole point was point number one. So be very careful. If you're doing it in 40 words, don't go, oh, I'm marvelous. Say, hang on. They expected me to use 50 more words. Have I given half a point? Because I sit there as the marker and I say, yes, you've got the point. It means that people are able to focus. But the marking guideline wants the second part. What do I do now? I can't give a half mark. So sometimes when I am marking in my own school, I kind of juggle it. I don't want to give the child naught. So I'll say, okay, I'll give you point number 1, but I won't give you point number 2 because you've got half of 1 and half of 2. But what happens at the national level is there has to be a decision made, which will be made afresh each year, about what do we do when the point is a long point and the student has given a tiny part of it. And that will be a decision that they will make for that particular paper. So it's really important that you get your marks. So the examiner suggests that you spend 30 minutes on this. So do I. Spend the time on this. It's well worth it. Get your marks. And say to yourself, if I'm really struggling in English, I can simply take it out. Silence provides one with the ability to focus. What would you get for that if you just quoted it? You'd get the tick and the 1 and the Q. And I don't know how many words we've got, but if you might lift the whole thing, tick 1 Q. So then you end up with 7 plus 0, and that is better than trying so hard to put it into your own words that you get 2 plus 1. Are you with me? So how do you prepare for this? Practice, practice, practice. Have a look at the passages they've set, have a look at the marking guidelines, and see what the examiners are looking for. And you should be able to get a minimum of 7. And if you've changed the words a little bit here and there, you get 7 plus 1. You get 80%. You get a distinction on this question. And that's what you're aiming at. So do the practice and see how it goes.